In some senses, I had already told the story, even though I'd only told it in shorthand. And retelling the story over again is not as much fun as telling the story for the first time.
Even if you haven't played Elden Ring, you may be familiar with this guy, Godrick the Grafted. Shown in many of the promotional materials and trailers, Godrick is one of the first demigods that players will face. Like most From Software games, Elden Ring sparsely uses cutscenes or exposition, leading to there being no concise way to fully understand what is going on in-game. Instead, the history of the world and its characters are located in the menu descriptions of items, the dialogue of NPCs, and the physical environments within the game. So just by playing the game and reading a few items, by the time you meet Godrick in the flesh, you probably learn that he is the last of the Golden Lineage, the royal line that ties its ancestry back to the first Elden Lord Godfrey, though some even scoff at the validity of this claim. He is not a brave or honorable man, as he hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital at the start of the Shattering War, and now resides in Stormvale Castle, where he also hid from Radahn, and then after insulting Melania, lost to her in battle. Seen here.
I am Melania.
His forces are made up of knights and soldiers who are loyal to him and his family. Clad in gilded armor and weapons, their coat of arms depicting the symbols of the Golden Lineage, as well as sellswords, exiled criminals, and banished knights who wear the symbols evoking the ancient dragons. But most of all, he has resorted to the grotesque act of grafting, and the Tarnished have been his primary victims. The Tarnished are the descendants of the warriors who were exiled with the first Elden Lord and first of the Golden Lineage, Godfrey. Godrick and the other nobles from the Golden Lineage have had many Tarnished mutilated, removing all of their limbs and attaching them to their own bodies, turning themselves into horrible monstrosities. This isn't just to enhance their own power, however. To prove his royal lineage, not only do him and his soldiers wear the ancestral coat of arms of the first Elden Lord, but Godrick is literally wearing a coat of arms made of the descendants of Godfrey's exiled warriors. And he's also going to perform a dragon puppet show. Everybody, give him a hand. Just by reading a few item descriptions, talking to a few characters, and exploring Stormvale Castle, can we learn all of this fairly easily. But this isn't how Elden Ring hides its story. After defeating a few demigods, multiple legendary foes, exploring above and below ground, you may find this Everjail off the beaten path. Inside is the gatekeeper who protects Elden Ring's story, the one you must pass to fully unlock its hidden lore. Godfrey the Grafted. On the surface, it may look like the game is just reusing boss fights to fill in content, but he is the key to understanding Elden Ring, its lore, and its story. Anyone can go on a wiki and read all of the item descriptions or dialogue to start painting a picture of the history of the lands between. But this isn't how its story was designed to be understood. To really know what's going on, you have to play the game, which may seem obvious, but it's for one very specific reason. The order in which Elden Ring reveals its information is sometimes more important than the information itself. Godfrey is a great example of this. While he may look like a copy of Godrick, his location tells us the opposite. Godrick had escaped the capital with the womenfolk, thanks to the Mimic Veil. We love mimics, don't we, folks? And Godfrey was imprisoned outside of the capital. So during this time, Godrick was not present, nor was he grafting when Godfrey was shoved in an Everjail. The only item in-game that even mentions Godfrey are the ashes of ancient dragon knight Kristoff, which tell us how his capture of Godfrey during the first defense of Leyndell led to Kristoff being awarded the hero's honor of an Erdtree burial. Our two Golden Lineage grafters also aren't exactly identical, since Godfrey doesn't have a dragon to graft, but Godrick does, allowing us to deduce that since Godfrey failed, Godrick is trying something new. Elden Ring uses a repeat boss like Godfrey to exemplify a few important things. There is almost always a causal relationship between events, and history repeats itself. Causality isn't a circle, it's a spiral. Like, why is grafting seen as grotesque, other than the obvious? And how could it have led to our two golden boys being rejected as heirs to Leyndell? We learn in Shadow of the Erdtree that Queen Marika's home was that of the Shaman village, and the flesh of shamans could meld harmoniously with others, leading to the horrendous jarring rituals of the Hornsent. These Numen women were whipped, mutilated, and stuffed into jars with that of other people, and sometimes animals, so that they could become saints and attain divinity. As descendants of Marika, Godrick and his ilk have inherited this unique property of their flesh, and they are engaging in a practice that's steeped in a vile history of subjugation and torture. Godrick's headband is even the same as the bands found on the legs of the poor jarred shaman women. By considering when we learn information, we could see how Elden Ring is setting up questions that it plans on answering later. Questions it sometimes didn't even expect you to ask. Even starting at a seemingly innocuous character like Godfrey, we can figure out practically all of Elden Ring's lore and story. For instance, why is Godrick going to graft a dragon to his body? Let's hear what he has to say on the matter. Sorry, wrong clip.
Mighty dragon, thou art a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred.
Long ago, the ancient dragons, nearly immortal beings made of stone, attacked the royal capital, forever altering its skyline and burying an untold amount of people under rubble and hellfire. This was the start of the bloody and terrible conflict known as the War Against the Ancient Dragons. But the demigod Godwyn the Golden defeated the ancient dragon Fortissax, befriending his fallen foe, for which this event would give rise to the capital's ancient dragon cult. Unfortunately for Godfrey, the ancient dragon knight Kristoff must not have received the memo on who he was dealing with. Godfrey traces his lineage to the first Elden Lord through Godwyn the Golden, the founder of the dragon cult that Kristoff is a part of. Part of? That he's a part of? He's a pirate! To rectify this, Godrick is going to graft a dragon to his arm and talk to Kristoff's manager, who is
King Morgott, last of all kings.
Morgott is another demigod, but he is the direct son of Godfrey and Marika, his great rune proving that he was born of the golden lineage, and that he is indeed the Lord of Leyndell. Unfortunately, he was born as a graceless and reviled Omen. Those who are born with mangled horns, aspects of the ancient crucible of life, and are assailed by vengeful spirits. Most children born Omen have their horns excised, causing them to perish, but Omen born of royalty keep their horns. The families of Omen have dolls bearing horns made to memorialize these poor children. As a direct son of Godfrey, Morgott had been imprisoned in the sewers of Leyndell with the rest of the Omen, and was shackled with a special fetish bathed in golden magic of the Erd Tree to handle all that great rune energy. The power of this magical shackle has faded, however, and since second Elden Lord Radagon and Marika have gone missing, he has taken it upon himself to become the protector of the Erd Tree, though and never loved him in return. At the very end of the game, before the fight with Godfrey at the base of the burning Erd Tree, he lovingly lifts up his son Morgott and passes on a somber greeting.
It's been a long while, Morgott.
And partway through fighting him, he gently removes the lion Siraj from his back, neatly takes off his shirt, and begins to wrestle us like a bear and roar like a beast. Found in a forest in the Land of Shadow, we can discover how Godfrey learned this fighting technique. From the Highlander and Gloried attire, which looks a lot like Godfrey's Elden Lord armor, we learn that Highland warriors are known to be the hunters of bears. To them, there is no act more glorious than the subjugation of a savage beast. And by defeating the great red bear Regulia, we can learn to emit his mighty roar, which is jokingly called the Bear Communion. Insert joke about the Pope and bears. It's an incantation that is more akin to the divine invocation of the Hornsent than it is to that of Dragon Communion. Only through desperate battle with the feral wild can one discover a god unique to oneself. From this, we learn that Godfrey was a Highland warrior who hunted bears, and discovered a god unique to oneself. The divine beasts are lions that are seen as messengers from the heavens, and when Miquella ascends to godhood, him and Radahn, the red lion, kind of looks like Godfrey and Siraj. Bear witness indeed. Godfrey's knights are all Crucible knights who can use the power of the Crucible to invoke the aspect of animals, and the Hornsent view the Crucible as sacred for their refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts. And in the Tower of Bellarat, if you antagonize the Hornsent grandma, she recites a curse.
A curse upon the strumpet's progeny, upon Marika's children, each and all. The curse of the Omen shall strike thee down.
Because of Marika's crusade on the Hornsent, her offspring would be haunted by vengeful spirits, the curse of the Omen. Hornsent children can also be born with a mass of horns that can cause them untimely deaths, just as the Omen are born with tangled horns, but are assailed by the vengeful spirits of the Hornsent. And much like Erd Tree culture would come to do, the Hornsent would make dolls to memorialize their own children born with oversized horns who would meet a frightful end. Uh-oh, somebody should tell Godrick that this dragon head might not be his meal ticket he thought it was. Or maybe he's busy. This all gives us a clear connection that Godfrey came from a culture adjacent to that of the Hornsent, and that he and his people have their genetics influenced by the Crucible as well. So it would make sense that his sons would be born as cursed Omen. Elden Ring once again set up the Omen, just to reveal later that their origins are of those with horn-sent descent. So why does Godwyn look like a fish and not a pincushion? I have searched far and wide, and I have yet to find aspect of the Crucible salmon. Godwyn looks like he has more in common with dragons than he does with the Hornsent or the Crucible. We know that Godfrey wasn't too keen on the ancient dragons. Although the capital has a dragon cult, and the worship of ancient dragons does not conflict with belief in the Erdtree, they still attacked his city. Throughout Limgrave and Liurnia are ruins that fell from the sky, and their glowing fragments are found everywhere. On the border of Caelid and Limgrave is a sword monument that reads, "Lord Godfrey, at last at the end of his campaign, his golden armies unvanquished and unbowed, yet finds grace lost, tattered, and faded." And going deep into Caelid, through the Dragon Barrows, we can find a cave with some Farum beastmen, similar to the first cave players find in Limgrave. Then the Farum Great Bridge, guarded by a dragon. And finally, the Bestial Sanctum, both places with similar architecture to our Sky Ruins. You can even find a legendary weapon from a Crucible Knight and a Leonian Misbegotten that tells of the ruins that fell from the sky because it was hit by a meteorite. In early game areas like the Third Church of Marika and the Church of Pilgrimage, we hear echoes of Marika talking directly to Godfrey about her divesting him of grace so he can leave the lands between, war, grow stronger, die, and be revived with grace to stand before the Elden Ring again. It isn't until we burn the Erdtree do we learn who Godfrey fought at the end of his campaign, and why it ended in Caelid. After using the Giant's Forge, we are transported to crumbling Farum Azula, lost beyond time, the source of the ruins that fell from the sky, the ancient city occupied by the dragon-worshipping beastmen and banished knights, and the ancient dragons themselves. We also find Godfrey's Crucible Knights, one standing victorious over a dead ancient dragon, and one fighting the Farum beastmen, as well as a malformed tree sentinel who uses armor and weapons made from felled ancient dragons. The Godefroy method strikes again. At the very start of the game, we are given hints about the end of Godfrey's wars, this ancient city, the beastmen who inhabit it, how it was destroyed, and that it may have been the home of dragons. And it isn't until the very end of the game do we get this big payoff and reveal, that after Godfrey invaded the city, it was destroyed, and Marika initiated her plan, Operation Tarnished Grace. So how does this connect to Godwyn? The ancient dragons were the prehistoric rulers of the lands between before the Erdtree. Something must have changed to get us from dragons and beasts to men and trees. During the age of the Erdtree, the ancient dragons attacked the Erdtree's capital city. This eventually leads to Godfrey attacking their city of Farum Azula, and this is where it gets interesting. While Godfrey was on an offensive war against the ancient dragons, Godwyn was making some scaly friends. Ancient dragons like Lanciax would take the form of priestesses to commune with the Knights of Leyndell and convert them into dragon cultists. Worship of ancient dragons was seen permissible because their scales and lightning are both gold. But when we get to Farum Azula, we find a secret spellbook that says that ancient dragons wield red lightning, and the color red is a big no-no color because of its connections to the fire giants and the primordial crucible. Uh-oh, looks like somebody got hoodwinked. Recall my video about manipulation. Add Godwyn to the list of puppets. Now, Godwyn is known for one really big event in Elden Ring's history. It is the catalyst for why the world is all messed up at the start of the game, the Night of the Black Knives. As per this finger reader crone, Godwyn was supposed to be a martyr for destined death. But oopsies, Ronnie the Witch pulled a fast one on the gang, sabotaging the Black Knife ritual, and Godwyn only got a soul death. His body unable to perish, but left to eternally decay. His soul-dead, rotting corpse is buried into the Erdtree's root system, and the rune of death begins spreading through the Great Tree roots. This prevents Erdtree burial because now souls can't be consumed by the Erdtree. Instead, black knotted roots protrude from the ground, disconnecting the Great Tree roots from the Erdtrees, and the lost spirits begin inhabiting skeletal remains, creating those who live in death. Since the Erdtree can't be nourished anymore via its root system, it begins to lose its luster. It doesn't produce any dew or sap. Magical fetishes bathed in gold begin to fade, and the omen they shackle are freed. The Age of Plenty comes to a close. Radagon becomes Elden Lord and ushers in the Age of the Elden Ring, until the Elden Ring is shattered, and Marika and Radagon go missing. The Tarnished begin to return. Morgott takes the title of Lord of Leyndell, and Godfrey fails his coup in the first defense of Leyndell, getting captured by the ancient Dragon Knight Kristoff. So thanks to Godfrey, we can see that, wait a minute, that's not all the lore. Alright, let's try this again. So there are these people called perfumers. They essentially make potions and aromatics that mimic the power of the Erd Tree. The act of perfuming was widely guarded by the capital until the Shattering War, and the perfumers were recruited into various militaries. But before that, they were attempting to heal the Omen and Misbegotten. When their efforts failed, they would watch over them to ensure they would die peacefully. A tale akin to the origins of the Deathbed Companions. And what would you know? Godwyn's girlfriend was a Deathbed Companion. She's hanging out at the Table of Lost Grace, giving out free hugs. But if you get one, she'll sap some of your life energy to pass on to her boyfriend, and in return, you get a Baldachin blessing, a favor bestowed by a deathbed companion, protection of a hidden temple in the guise of a bedchamber. The favor allows one to forget any aches and pains. In death, there is only peace, for in death, there can be no sensation. How nice. When Godwyn died his soul death and was buried into the roots, we got those who live in death, skeletons reanimated by lost souls. The Golden Order was created by confining destined death, the rune that dictates the fated deaths people should die. Its removal essentially made the demigods immortal, and meant that most people would need to go through special burial rituals like ghost flame cremation or Erd Tree burial in order to perish. Otherwise, they might turn up like this. Yuck. Those who live in death just happen to fall outside of the logic of the Golden Order, as spirits who live in dead bodies. All Fia wants is to be a mother of those who live in death, and to do that, she must lie with the remains of Godwyn, the Prince of Death, so she can create a mending rune that will bring about the age of the duskborn, an order with death restored. But something fishy's going on here. Those who live in death carry a very peculiar shield. The Sunrealm Shield, shield of honor depicting a city crowned by the sun. It has seen better days. Much like the wear upon the shield, the seat of the sun has long faded away. Throughout the entire game, we explore and visit castles that have the same design as the castle on the Sunrealm Shield, and all of these places have the armor and armaments of the dragon-worshipping banished knights. Places like Castle Morn, Castle Sol, the Fortified Manor, and many more. Say, what happened to the Sunrealm? I bet this big glowing tree had something to do with it. You can find these Sunrealm skellies nearly everywhere in the Lands Between, but it isn't until the end of the game in Farum Azula, a place where the sun is always setting, do you find the Beastmen who live in death, carrying the same shield. How very interesting. Godwyn seems to be bringing back a lot of advocates of those silly ancient dragons. Nigh-on immortal beings made of stone who used to rule in a time before the Erd Tree. I'm beginning to think that Fia might like Godwyn for more than his good looks. To get Fia's mending room, you need to enter her deathbed dream and fight the Lich Dragon Fortissax, the ancient dragon that Godwyn befriended and led to the creation of the ancient dragon cult. After Godwyn the Golden becomes the Prince of Death, the ancient dragon Fortissax fought long and hard against death within its companion. Alas, victory was never achieved, and its only reward was corruption. Fortissax has black scales with gold underneath and resembles Fia, wearing her black shawl with gold hair hidden underneath. It isn't until Shadow of the Erd Tree do we meet the ancient dragon priestess Fortissax. Each night, the priestess offers her own sleep to her lord, and in turn receives the power of his favor, the ancient dragon's blessing, favor bestowed by the Dragon Communion priestess. In the name of the Dragon Lord Fortissax, consume FP to increase all forms of damage negation. It looks and functions a lot like the Baldachin blessings. Just look at them. So by progressing into Shadow of the Erd Tree, we are shown the origin of the Deathbed Companions came from the ancient dragon priestesses, helping us deduce that Fia is Fortissax. And by progressing to Farum Azula, we learn that the Sunrealm and those who live in death are aligned with the ancient dragons, revealing that the ancient dragons weren't just trying to take down Leyndell by force, but through subterfuge by manipulating the demigod Godwyn. Though there are multiple parties who had their own unique interests in the Night of the Black Knives, Godwyn being dubbed a martyr for destined death makes a lot more sense now that we can partially connect it to a plot that would destabilize the Erd Tree and reinstate ancient dragon rule. A king relinquishes not the hand, right, Ensha? Just kidding, Ensha can't talk. He's a skeleton.
But wait!
Godrick was going to graft a dragon to his arm to impress the ancient dragon cultist, but wouldn't you know, that's the wrong type of dragon. Poor guy can't catch a break. Found throughout the underground in the eternal cities amongst the Nox and the Mimics, we also find dragonkin soldiers, failed copies of dragons that the Nox were attempting to create. We see these guys a total of 3 times. And then in Shadow of the Erd Tree, we find...
Curse you, Bale!
Man, they look really similar. Check out this video about how Bale was created. Bale betrayed the Dragon Lord Fortissax and knocked his socks and his heads clean off. To recover from his wounds, Fortissax needs to take an eternity nap, like he's on his deathbed, and the ancient dragon priestess will be his companion, offering him her solace so he can sleep beyond time. And since Bale was a traitor, the priestess also brought dragon communion to the world, convincing humans to hunt and consume the hearts of dragons as to quell Bale and his bloodline, the Drakes, the bastards among the ancient dragons. Nobility like Kenneth Haight make remarks early in the game calling into question Godrick's lineage to Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Godrick is grafting a bastard dragon to himself. Later, we learn that Morgott the Omen is the true heir to Leyendell in the Golden Lineage. And nowhere in-game is it ever actually stated that Godwyn is in fact the son of Godfrey. Every single demigod has it listed in-game who their parents are, except for Godwyn and Godrick. What a strange omission. Is Godwyn's missing daddy actually a dragon? Find out in a future video, or watch this pre-Shadow of the Erd Tree video about Godwyn in case you can't wait. When we finally get to Farum Azula and find the hidden boss fight with Fortissax, we learn that he was actually an Elden Lord before the Erd Tree, and that not only is he chilling out here recovering from his battle with Bale, but that his god fled, and the Dragon Lord is awaiting its return. So, where'd the god go? Halfway through the game, do we learn that the ancient dragons attacked Leyendell, and it isn't until defeating a secret boss hidden in one of the final levels that we learn why that is. Dragon Lord Fortissax is awaiting the return of his god who fled, and Leyendell is the home of the Erd Tree and the god America, allowing us to piece together the motivation behind the war against the ancient dragons. This method for learning the story is even present before you even start playing the game. When you first pick up your copy of Elden Ring, on the cover is the title Elden Ring, and a picture of the Elden Ring. Inside, a disc, Elden Ring. The goal of the Tarnished is to go to the Erd Tree and stand before the Elden Ring. But the game can be really hard, so you have to do things like level up your healing flask using golden seeds, which say that when the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erd Tree, scattering across the various lands, as if life itself knew that its end has come. If they don't give you enough juice, you can use the Crimson Seed Talisman, which is patterned after an Erd Tree seed. The Erd Tree was once perfect and eternal. Thus, it was believed that Erd Tree seeds could not exist, and at the very depths of the Erd Tree's majestic root system, where Godwyn is buried, is the oldest spell that derives from the Erd Tree, Elden Stars. It says that the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. When you finally make it to the capital, you can't even get into the Erd Tree to get to the Elden Ring, so you have to burn it down. But when you do, it brings you to Farum Azula to unleash destined death, and in that room is a picture of the Elden Ring. It looks like a seed, sprouting roots. Beneath it is a woman, surrounded by 3 wolves, modeled exactly like the red wolves of Radagon. After the death of Radagon, the Elden Ring turns into the Elden Beast, and the arena transforms into an ocean, with spectral Erd Trees, and the light of a golden sunset, reaching as far as the eye can see. It isn't until Shadow of the Erd Tree do we get the Crimson Seed Talisman +1. The Erd Tree seed of this talisman was presumed to be an object of myth. This age-old artifact also depicts the 2 fingers, perhaps harkening back to the birth of the Erd Tree. It looks like 2 fingers planting the seed that would bring about the Erd Tree. It looks like the relief from Farum Azula is showing us that the Elden Ring is that Erd Tree seed. Further yet still, we can find Mater, the mother of fingers, underneath what looks like a body of water, as far as the eye can see. She is the mother of all 2 fingers, those that instruct the faithful and choose Empyreans to house the Elden Ring and ascend as gods. Mater is the daughter of the Greater Will. She was the first shooting star to fall upon the lands between. She used to receive signs from the Greater Will from beyond the microcosm before the arrival of the Elden Beast. Despite being broken and abandoned, she kept waiting for another message to come. Her remembrance can give you the gazing finger weapon. With the Ash of War kowtowers resentment. It's a skill that performs a violent bow, and resentment builds as it's forced to bow, making it explode in anger. Who is the Mother of Fingers angry with? It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. The Mother of Fingers is angry with the Elden Beast, the vassal beast of the Greater Will, and the living incarnation of the concept of order. With a vassal of order present in the lands between, there would be no need for her father to send more messages. Marika is a Newman, long-lived and seldom born, a shaman whose flesh melds harmoniously with others, and an Empyrean, chosen by the Fingers to become a god of a coming age. Elden Ring sets up a lot of questions, and it intends on answering all of them. Throughout the game, we travel through a world broken by war, torment, destruction, hate, and despair. It shows us those who have been hurt by the cruelty that man inflicts on his fellow, and it wants to tell us why. Because of a lust for power, because of a need for revenge, because of a fear of the other, just because. It shows us that hate begets hate, and violence begets violence. It shows us that when one cosmic being was scorned by another, it convinced a woman with great gifts that she could save herself and the one she loved from an eternity of suffering. Through seduction and betrayal, at the top of the world with corpses laid at her feet, she could reach into the heavens bathed by a never-ending golden sunset as far as the eye could see, grab hold of a beast from beyond, and imprison the Elden Ring within her, so she could control the order of things. Elden Ring hides its story not just in the description of items, cryptic dialogue between characters, or on the reliefs and tapestries found in ruined castles and palaces, but in the order and the location that you learn these things. At the very end of Elden Ring, when you're about to enter the Erd Tree, a great white light flashes, and you're transported inside. After the defeat of the final boss, you can enter New Game Plus to do it all again. During the introductory cutscene, your Tarnish is gifted with grace, and a great white light flashes, transporting you to the Chapel of Anticipation. The item that all players begin with at the start of the game is the Memory of Grace, which looks not only like Sights of Grace used to rest at, but also like a golden sunset reflecting off the water. The Memory of First Grace, which once guided bygone Tarnish to the lands between. It is merely a cycle. Stand before the Elden Ring. Become the Elden Lord. On your first playthrough here, the grafted scion would most likely kill you, throwing your body into the water and allowing you to continue with the rest of the game. But on your second go around, you'll most likely defeat them. Afterwards, you're rewarded with a new path forward, dotted with nascent butterflies. An arcane butterfly with translucent wings. This butterfly appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. These butterflies are closely associated with the eternally youthful, ever bewitching Empyrean Miquella. You can find these butterflies in many curious places throughout the lands between, and their locations tell a story, but none more clearly than the butterflies who flap their wings at the end of this path, where the rocks are loose and the fall is deadly, leading to your Tarnished being washed up in a stranded gravesite, sure to die, and being found by Melina on the back of Torrent, the spectral steed.
Torrent has chosen you. Treat him with respect.
And thanks to him, your Tarnished can travel through the world of Elden Ring, bask in its beauty, witness its horrors, and uncover its mystery, such as finding Castle Sol, black banners waving in the wind, depicting the sun in eclipse. Throughout the game, we learn from items that the sun in eclipse is the symbol of the wandering mausoleum where soulless demigods slumber, and that the eclipse sun, drained of color, is the protective star of soulless demigods. But to reach Miquella's Halig Tree, we need to come here to get the second half of his secret medallion, guarded by golden lightning-clad veterans and ancient dragon-worshipping banished knights. Here, amongst the allies of Miquella, we can find the Eclipse Hotel. In Sol, the sight of an eclipse inspires a dreadful awe, preventing an onlooker from averting his gaze.
O great sun, frigid sun of Sol, surrender yourself to the eclipse. Grant life to the soulless bones.
It has a unique skill, where raising it aloft ignites a death flare, and sets the lustrous sun ablaze with the Prince of Death's flames. And if you play the game enough, you will learn that the eclipse has already happened, that it was the catalyst that set all else into motion, that when Ranni, the Dark Moon Witch, interfered with the Night of the Black Knives, she eclipsed Godwyn the Golden's attempts to become a martyr for destined death. When the curse mark was carved at the moment of death of the first demigod, it should have taken the shape of a circle. However, 2 demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into 2 half-wheels. Ranni was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. You will learn that Godwyn's story had already ended with the creation of Deathroot, and the young Empyrean only needed him to grant life to the soulless bones and end the age of the Erd Tree. It isn't until Shadow of the Erd Tree, and following Sir Mor's questline, do we learn who sent Torrent to find our Tarnished. In a cookbook given to us by Sir Mor, there are 2 recipes. One is for spirit raisins that Torrent has a taste for, and another is Miquella's Charming Branch, a branch blessed with an incantation of unalloyed gold that can bewitch those under a spell, those saved from mimics, and those who live in death. O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death. From your first footsteps in the lands between, to the top of the world at the gate of divinity, Miquella has guided you. There's something he wants you to see, and this is how Elden Ring hides its story.
The butterfly effect, as I called it. You crush a butterfly in the Jurassic, and suddenly you've changed all of human history from that point forward, unintentionally. A little change in a long narrative can have big changes further on.
Thank you for watching the video all the way through. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. In the description of this video, you could find links to my other videos, as well as a link to my Discord server. Till next time, keep hunting for that story. See you then.
For everything I've done wrong.